is it going? Where is it? There it is. Copy link. All right, I think everybody's up, ready to roll. Good afternoon. There we go, all set up. Might even break out a Kickstarter I got in the mail. Get some people in here. Trying a somewhat different approach to penciling process than I've been using before, where I did kind of a half-sized pencil job, which is what's scanned on here. So I did that. It's here out of the way. So I did this kind of half-sized approach, and then I'm doing the larger one. I'm just kind of going over like with some pencils over the major detail areas, and hopefully that will kind of help speed things up a little bit for me. Now that I'm going to get back into this. So take that. There we go. So yeah, that's what I'm trying out here. So for those that don't know me, I'm Peter SAKIEVICH. I'm an art professor, illustrator, artist, and trying to get my own little thing here going. So welcome aboard. Do let me know if there's any questions or comments. So there's one more button I need to press over here. You. Let's try that one again, I guess. It's not working. I think that one just didn't work properly. It's the wrong link. There we go. I need to grab the sticker page just to launch the page properly. There we go. So that's kind of what I'm experimenting with you, though. So I did kind of pencils half size, just because I could see both pages really easily, and maybe cut back on focusing too much on all of the details. And so now I can focus in on some details. And so when I get into inking, I can maybe move a little bit faster. And things where it's maybe more important when you focus on those smaller elements, right? So anyway, next one. Let's just make sure. I also did kind of a rebuild of my streaming setup on my desk a bit, so which I think will be nice to have. Yeah, see, that looks like the nose being that large, the mouth should be larger. So yeah, just chilling and penciling this afternoon. Um, and well, I did skip broadcasting the morning study session. I did do some stuff, so I just didn't think it would be of particular interest. So I didn't broadcast it. It was me learning how to use VDM brushes and create my own texture brushes in Blender, so that way I could kind of move forward with the little study I've been working on in the mornings. So let's see, where's my little mirror? Oh. So yeah, anyway, well, hello over there. Oh, hello, Yevgeny. Добрый день. You also do art? I appreciate that. Yeah, I was trying to get this done. I've been working on, so, Zhenya. So I've had this like course I've set a time to kind of finish off this course I started for my teaching site. And basically, kind of what you do is create an isometric diorama, and then you sketch it from different points of view. And I originally created it when I was at Ringling, and I'd only finished one of them, one of the four I had students do, which is this one right here, 2-point perspective view. So the idea is you kind of situate yourself in the scene, you look at something, and then I kind of create this kind of isometric camera. So you kind of look to the left, look to the right, and so you can kind of sketch from inside. The idea is you're kind of learning to master your ability to visualize. Not that you necessarily did, but like, for the students that I had, it was really handy. But I hadn't done the other projects in the series, so like so I've been finishing them off and recording them and getting them uploaded to my art professor site. So this is the 1-point view. So you're kind of standing over here and looking this way instead. And then there's a where is it? Fisheye. So I showed you kind of the what I call the 1-point fisheye. So we're looking in the middle, and everything kind of wraps around that. So there's the fisheye one. So again, you're kind of standing over here, looking this way, looking at the scene. And then I have like this other one that I do. I call it the long lens or telephoto lens effect. But it's really kind of a 2-point or an angled view, orthographic view, and kind of treat that as a super telephoto effect. So that's kind of what I've been doing on the side, and getting that all recorded and uploaded and set up on my art professor site. And anyway, I finished that off the other day. We finished recording it, I don't know, a week or so ago, and then I've been working on the editing and all of that business. It's been kind of sitting on the back burner bothering me for a long time, so I thought I would clear it off my plate. And It's originally created for motion design, entertainment design, and virtual reality students at Ringling College of Art and Design, where I was before I am now. And I actually used kind of a version of the assignment in a concept design drawing class. But anyway, now it's done. I was saying earlier, I'm working kind of exploring a little bit of a method where I do the original pencils kind of half size, and then this will be the fully inked one, but I'm planning on doing is basically just focusing on penciling in some of the details, especially like the faces and maybe the hands. And then if anything else I feel like could use some attention, do that just in this larger phase, and then do the inking on top. So that's more or less what we got going on here. Yeah, so I've let this kind of sit on the side while I've been working on getting that kind of cleaned up. So this is a sample page for my little project. This is from much later in the story. So the other ones I've been doing tend to be much earlier, kind of the very beginning. And I wanted to do, so I'm kind of putting together the pitch project here. I wanted to do some stuff from that happens kind of later, much later on. So. And this is based kind of on a concept sketch in my sketchbook that I did a while ago. And I think it works well with this phase of the story. So that's what I got going on here. You know, do let me know if there's any questions from anybody. So the story here is basically the working title was Bramble. I think I'm going to go with something like Breach. And for some reasons. But yeah, so the story is humans, they've sent out this kind of generational colony ship to this planet, you know, to a point where humanity kind of unified, and they arrive, and something happens when they arrive where there's kind of a disaster. And the main part of the story is set after that. but a number of the colony ships that were part of the original flight, there's a kind of a main group that lands together or arrives together, but there's these other ones that kind of get separated off and crash or land on other parts of the planet. And the planet has some strange properties. It looks like a giant tangle of weeds, and there's a lot of dangerous wildlife, and there's evidence of a prior civilization on this world, but none of the inhabitants are there. There's no fossils of them. There's just the wildlife and these kind of massive structures that look like giant tangled plants. So they've kind of nestled into one of the structures there and have their colony, and they're struggling. They're having trouble with the local wildlife in terms of eating it, eating the plants and accessing the nutrients on the planet. Like they just can't handle it very well. And they're kind of reaching the end of the supplies, the recycling processes and all the supplies and everything that they brought with them. And this guy right here, I need to redraw, he's been sent out to check in on what appears to be another one of these colony ships. So it's crashed somewhere else, and suddenly its beacon goes off, and he's kind of the last person who's gone out into the wilds of the planet a long time ago, and he's volunteered to go out and see what's going on. And he's supposed to go find a buoy, a kind of informational buoy, a black box, and that'll kind of give them the manifest of the ship and what happened to it, and whether or not it's worth sending out a larger party to go kind of take what's on it back to the colony. And so this is a scene much later on where he's kind of run into some people. So I wanted to have this for something like this for the pitch. So I kind of know, I've like rough sketched out some of these later scenes, and the whole story's been kind of plotted, but I need to, that feels better doing it at this scale. So that's what we got going on here. I saw they released the trailer for Clayface. Looks interesting. I don't know. We'll see. So mostly just chilling and working on these, so I feel good about that guy now, a lot more anyway. Trying out penciling with the 2H today, just to see. I'm usually using the F, but I'm thinking, well, maybe it's just trying to keep it a little sharper. Might be worth pulling this one out. All right. And I'm going to work this one anyway. Let's see. Make sure that's still. There we go. I never wanted this space to be longer and narrower, and too wide. So I did rework my whole desk setup, so I kind of cleared up most of what was up on the edge of the ridge, so now I can use my T-square a little more easily. I got a couple of stands that clamp into the side of the desk, and then these, I forget what they're called, but they're these C-clamps, and they kind of rotate. And I bought a closet, metal closet, what's the word, rod. It's a little bit thicker than I'd like, but it still works okay with what I got. And it allows me to kind of clamp on a bunch of stuff over the desk, so it's kind of out of the way, which is nice. And then when they had that Amazon day, I picked up a bunch of like, not a bunch, but a few kind of these clamped arm thing. Oh, there's magic arms, but there's a couple other kinds too that I picked up. Hello. Over on Instagram. How's it going out there? Yeah, I hope the horned lizard hasn't been too upsetting for people with my little morning study project. Let's bring that in. But so yeah, again with the comic stuff, I'm very much a neophyte, so it's not something I've always been interested in but never pursued. And kind of the more I've been looking at what's going on in the professional arts and all that, I thought maybe now's the time to kind of pursue that. Looking at my own interests and trajectory, and so been working on this pitch project. Well, it started originally as like a concept art revival portfolio project for myself. And as I worked on it, kind of stories started working themselves into it, because I was like, well, it's better to kind of have some kind of narrative to focus your concept art around, right? So if you look at what Ian McCaig has to say about visual development and thinking about characters and story, that it can help a lot to to have that as kind of at the core. And so as I was working on this concept piece, I had stories. I'm like, well, I hate to kind of just leave them lying around. And so this wasn't the first one I came up with. I'll still probably go back to the first one at some point. That one's set much, much later. But I thought this one would be interesting because I was trying to kind of strip it down to a smaller number of characters to focus on. So kind of one main character really to focus on for the most part. There's some others, but so that's kind of what I'm thinking. It's going to drop frames. That's good. Maybe it's being plugged in is the problem. But yeah, getting the desk setup was kind of interesting. It was kind of entertaining to a certain degree. One of the fun things about being an artist is you kind of like build forts all the time, right? So you've got your studio space set up, and you've got all this stuff on it, right? All this materials and tools, and it's kind of like a fort. Only you get to actually use it for something. Which I like the idea of. So, oh, that's what we got going on. But I do this between now and when it's time to take the dog out for his WALK, his afternoon constitutional before we have dinner. So, that's what we got going on. Hopefully come back this evening. what comic is this? It's my own project. So, been working on this pitch project for a while now. It started out as a kind of as a concept art update. I was using it to kind of go through some new things, and as I was working on a bunch of stories, so it's uh, so it's a pitch project for that. So basically, this is a scene for much later in the story. So I have a bunch of other stuff I've done that's kind of more from the beginning, and this is much kind of later on. And with the story, basically, is there's a he's this guy right here. He's part of a colony that landed on this alien planet. They're part of like a generational uh, kind of a colony ship. Not just a ship, but a whole, like a whole what's the word? Not flotilla, but a whole group of them. And they when they arrived, before he was born is when they arrived. And so this said about 80 years after that, and he has been sent out to find one of the other ships. So when they arrived, they were kind of ran into some problems, and a number of the ships landed in other parts of this planet and kind of disappeared. They didn't hear from them, so they're all just gone. But he's part of the main group that landed together. And he's been sent out after one of their beacons goes off from the other ships, and he's been sent out to investigate it, and hoping to find some supplies because the colony is running low, and they're hoping that this lost ship that they assume there's no survivors on has supplies that they can then take back to the main colony and extend the life of the colony. So he's gone out to find this beacon and see what information's on it, where it's at, and then send that information back to the colony. And to a large degree, he's actually been sent out on a one-way trip, and he knows that. So they can't bring him back because they just can't waste the resources unless he finds something out there. So he's gone out on this trip to do this recovery and hopefully find what he needs so he can bring it back to them and help them survive. So it's a pitch project that I am working on for myself, and if you're interested in it, if you're on the YouTube side, I think there's a link in the description where you can, if you want to get on the email list, you can do that for when I launch it. I want to set up some regular publishers first, but if people want to know about it when it comes out, that's the link. Link will be in there for that. It's been on hold for a bit while I've been working on other things, but kind of cleared a lot of that stuff out of the way that was in the way, distracting me. And so I want to definitely try and get this out before the end of summer rolls around, which is almost here in a few weeks. So that's what it is. The working title is Breach. So the guy's name is Vincent Breach. And it's not its first working title I've had, but that's the current one. So that's what we got going on. So I'm working on a little kind of technique-y thing here where I did the regular pencils at half size, and now I'm kind of mostly just doing pencils over some of the details in here. Let's see, let's get that over just a little bit. So that try and speed up the process a little bit here. And see how that goes. Let's see, iron burner there. So let me know if there's any questions. That's kind of the gist of the story, and what the intent is. You know, one of the kind of unusual things maybe is the setting. So the planet that they land on, they discovered as they kind of got close enough to actually be able to see it, that it appears to be like a giant tangle of plants. So it's like a bramble, like a briar almost. And there's evidence on the planet for some kind of past civilization. They're not sure what kind of make of the artifacts and things they find, and then there's also kind of no evidence of any biological remains of the original inhabitants, but they're all apparently gone. There's no indication that they're there, and why the planet looks like it does and how it works and all that stuff is like not really evident in kind of the way things are there. It's kind of confusing to them. As to what's going on. And it turns out it's not very safe either. They assume they'd be able to use the plant and wildlife for their own purposes, to be able to eat them and get nutrients and all that from the surface, and they haven't really been able to do that very successfully. So the colony is kind of in a desperate situation. So that's why they send him out to hopefully find out if the this other colony ship that they've located, or the beacon that they've located for it, might have stuff that they can, eat. Who would be the ideal? Well, I probably would start with, try to start at the top, probably with somebody like Image, see what they say. But I have to look and see, there's other publishers that are doing indie stuff like Boom or is it Mad Cave, and there's Oni. There's a number of them out there. I'd probably start with Image just to see what they do, because I know they've got a lot of creator stuff, but they. Yeah, I've heard also just that they tend to be hesitant unless you've got some kind of track record, and I don't have any with this kind of thing. So the big thing for me was just making the project as. Oops, got my eraser. It's a long way down. My dog doesn't want to pick up my eraser for me. Like I'm very cozy in my bed. So. Yeah, so depending on, I'll put that out there, and then depending on what people say, I may do that, or, if the email list gets large enough, maybe I could do a successful Kickstarter. But I'd like to get it, published. I think that would be, kind of the goal. But I got to finish putting the pitch together and see how it looks and what I think. And have enough pages done. So pitches, you don't actually need that many pages. I've looked at different publishers, and most want around like 5 pages and a cover. You want your synopsis and kind of the overall plan, issue by issue plan, along with spoilers to be contained within it. So, I haven't really done comics, so I'm planning on mostly doing everything myself. So I'm looking for some ways of speeding certain aspects of it up, so I can at least get it out in a timely fashion. Or if the Kickstarter thing happens, then maybe it's worth doing over. I have like 12-ish, 10 to 12 issues kind of written up for this story as a complete thing. And so, plotted out, not fully scripted or anything. And then I've thumbnailed out the first issue a while back, but I want to revise that because it's just been a while. And ultimately, kind of what he finds out changes a lot of things for the colony, for himself, and his perception of what's important. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. Start with those few, see what they say, if anything. You never know, right? So keep this round. So kid over here. I don't know. What do you think? Sounds like a plan. If that would hear me okay. Yeah, I kind of reworked my whole desk setup not too long ago. I feel like it's working okay, but you never know. Let's see. So, yeah. That's what we got going on. Cheek up a little bit. So I'm going to bring it closer up since kid features are a lot smaller on the face. Yeah, before I throw the pitch at them, I'll probably throw it at some other people that I think can help kind of give me good feedback. Oh, good. I think this does help to kind of do this process here. Let's see. So magnets. Maybe I should do this one up here. Do the big one. Start up here, right? The important parts. They go a little long in here. With like 90% of this, I can just do freehand with the inking. Just make sure I clarify what's what. And that's her right there. feels good. And this is all going to be pretty small in here. So that's probably fine. And here. What I did is um, I kind of plotted out scene by scene what I wanted. So like, yeah, well, each issue I kind of set up a goal for each issue to have. So I have the whole story, and then I kind of broke it into its major story beats, and then I subdivided those into what would be done for each issue, effectively. Uh, so I just said like these things have to happen within it, and then I know the approximate number of pages per uh, and then kind of sketched out those with a much smaller thumbnails of what I wanted, because it's just easier for me to work it, from a very, very simple, at least so far it's been much easier for me to work from like a simple plot form and then get it visual as quickly as I can. Because for me, a lot of times, I can have a lot of thoughts verbally in my head, and until I get it on paper, so I can see it, like it's not going to be very, very clear. And so I wanted to make sure I got it, visual as quickly as I could. And then from there, once I kind of had the visuals in, then I can develop the script, the specific words of the script that way. So I try to leave enough room for words to be said on here. But that's kind of how I don't have like a full script that I'm working with. It's it's almost like a quasi Marvel method, because I'm trying to again use my strength, which is the visual elements. I think not so much the verbal necessarily, and kind of make that make the visual the center of it, because visual storytelling is always where it's at, generally speaking, especially when it comes to comics or film or games. You definitely want the visuals to carry everything, the story, the narrative, all that good stuff, and then use the words to kind of augment that. So that's kind of how I've been writing it. So I started off with the Dan Harmon story circle as kind of the structure of it, and then for the whole story, there's like I'm using the story circle, and then I'm also using it for each issue. So there's kind of working through the phases of it per issue, but also from scene to scene. So that's kind of the way that I've been kind of structuring it, is using that. So, I've got character sketches and locations, and I've also tried to do when I was doing the initial story beats, I kind of roughed them out visually, so I could see what they were. So So like, if there's this event right here or this location, I've got kind of a storyboard that I put together for that. I actually made a little worksheet that's got like the Dan Harmon story circle on it. So it's like each of the phases, which is like you need, go, search, find, take, return, change. And kind of got that laid out on there. And then so there's a block like write notes of the story beats within each of those phases. And then next to it, I have an open area that's also for the visuals, so I can kind of sketch in quick story beats on the side. So that's what I've been doing. I know there's a wide variety of approaches for that. But yeah, because it's important for me to be able to kind of see the whole thing, the gestalt, I guess, before before I get too particular on any one part. Otherwise, it's very easy for me to get caught up in small details, in the weeds, as it were. So that's what I've been doing. Yeah, I can work pretty well, I think, just because it's just me, right? So I'm not really having to check in with, another writer or artist or whatever. And then I plan is to keep the colors really basic. I want to mostly do them flat shapes. So that and I can use, well, let's probably use the iPad actually for coloring, because there's a program that I like a lot called Infinite Painter, and it's got a brush. Actually, you can get sort of part of it in Clip Studio. It's basically where you draw. It's like a selection fill. So basically, like you draw a selection, and it fills it with a color. And Clip Studio has this, but one of the things that's different about Infinite Painters, and I'm actually not using that aspect for this, at least I don't think I will be, is in Infinite Painter you can actually apply a texture to that. So in Clip Studio it's got to be flat, but in Infinite Painter you can put like a rock texture or a paper texture or like a screen tone texture, right? Halftone texture, or whatever. So it has kind of that unique working property to it. I wish they had a PC version of it, but they don't. But I'm mostly planning just using the flat color, so I might end up just using my computer and doing it on the desktop. But I kind of like the idea of doing it on the iPad, because the iPad's pretty close to actual size in terms of the screen, the iPad Pro. And so it has that, kind of advantage to it. To work with it. So that's kind of the way that I've been working. So yeah, so I have that. You know, it's in a binder in here. But I've been thinking about doing the roughs at the very least. Maybe doing those digital, just because if I want to move something around, it's a little easier to do that there. And kind of help me work smaller and focus. But yeah, I guess, like I said, you could probably call it, it's like a quasi marble method to a certain degree. So, and in terms of like paneling each page, if you look at a lot of, depending on the comics you're looking at, it can vary a lot. I know a lot of American comics, they tend to be like 4 or 5 panels per page. Maybe 6 or 7 if you want to like really push it. But I've been reading Absolute Batman, and Dragotta in there. He'll sometimes put like 20, 30 panels on a page, where he's trying to like really push the energy, I guess, the aggression, the back and forth. He'll expand that number of panels pretty significantly, and so I think that's one of the general rules, is that like if they're smaller and there's more of it, it kind of makes you look at the page longer, but it also, there's less stuff, and so you're kind of moving a little faster visually when you're doing that. And I think that's kind of the general rule. And fewer, tends to mean like you're moving across, you're finishing the page faster, obviously, because there's, and it depends on your level of detail and all those other things too. But however many are required. So if you need like reaction going on, then you add more. But if you need, but if you don't need that many, usually, it's, along with like most things, usually less is better, less is more per se. But I think, if you look at a lot of comics, I would look at the ones you like and the pacing they have and see how many they use. Because a lot of them, there's really not that many per page. It's like here I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and that's a high, a higher number, I guess, than you see a lot of the time. So I don't know if that. But I would look at what other people are doing, how many they've used, and why. What's the effect it has, if any. Does it get in the way? Does it add to it? So, but I think it's always a good idea to try and use fewer, generally speaking. But I wouldn't necessarily look to me for advice. Again, like I say, I'm not that experienced with this. I've never been published for this kind of thing. I have a background in concept art, but that's a different animal. Yeah, the most important thing I generally think is clarity. I know like when things don't feel clear, then that's where you can kind of lose people because you confuse them. Like I was reading a book recently by an artist I like a lot. I'm not as big a fan of his writing. He tends to, I guess, use millennial writing in there. It's like everything's kind of a jokey joke, and I don't like that. But I like his art a lot. And yeah, but there was definitely stuff going on where it was like I felt like something was missing. Like there was like missing panels or missing pages or something in the story because something was like, wait, what? And that kind of thing throws me off. And if I get thrown off by that, it's probably hitting other people other ways. So, so I would, in terms of like deciding that, I would maybe when you're working on the stuff, show it to somebody that you can trust and get their, especially someone who's not an artist, maybe, or isn't that as familiar with comics that and show it to them and gauge their response. Like if they're asking a lot of questions and they're confused, then you haven't put enough information on the page, assuming they're of, reasonable, normal intelligence. And that kind of gives you a lot of important information, right? Is to see how people respond. So like when I showed some of my pages to some people I trust, I'm almost watching more for not what they say in terms of like the actual advice or whatever. I'm looking more at how they respond, and that's of more interest to me than what they actually say necessarily. What they say can be important too, but a lot of times like people's comments on a specific critique might be wrong, but their comment is really that there's something throwing them off, right? Or something that's not quite right, and maybe they don't know exactly what it is, even if they're professionals, but they can feel that something isn't working, and they're using whatever they have in order to explain what that missing thing is. And the critique there is to kind of use that as a guide to help you, figure that out. Oh, man, what I really want to clarify there. This downshot, though, has been somewhat of a struggle. It's like, pay attention to how other people work, too. So, like, if you look at, like, Mike Mignola, he doesn't tend to use a lot of panels, but he also doesn't tend to use a lot of variety in his shot angles. And no one really complains about that, but something if you kind of look at his work, you'll see, it's all kind of like at level. The viewer is at the same level as the characters and everything in the shot. And then he also doesn't do a lot of facial expressions. So if you look at his stuff, the characters really aren't emoting with their faces. They might with their gesture once in a while. That's one of the reasons it has so much impact is, when Hellboy leaps into action or something happens, like it stands out a lot because for the most part, everything is very kind of chill. Things aren't moving around a lot until all of a sudden they are. And so I think that can be more helpful, is like just looking at what other people are doing and why and the effect it has. Yeah, it's like that. So enlarge these a bit more as they go up. Yeah, so that's kind of how I decide this. So, it's, it's like I see what the whole story is, and that helps me make the decisions better for myself, at least. Um, sure there. Downwardness is strongly indicated on here. So, but I think part of it too is just getting experience, seeing what works, what doesn't. Making things on a consistent and sufficient volume. Um, the kind of shots you need per scene. Like, you probably need, for the most part, you'll need like an establishing shot um, at the beginning of every double page, facing pages. So that way your viewer knows exactly where they are and who everybody is and how things relate. And then they can kind of tell what's happening, without getting lost. They know exactly where they at, what's happening where, and it's visually distinct enough that they can kind of follow along without too much effort. You're not putting too much of a burden on your viewer to understand your story. So, I always tell my students, it's all about, initially at least, it's primarily going for clarity, right? That you want to make sure, what's happening is very clear, that people can understand what's happening and why and where and how. Otherwise, people kind of get bored or disinterested when they're confused, right? They're like, oh, I'll find something else to do. I don't understand this. You see that with games maybe that are hard to play or whatever. If it's like really vague as to how things work, then they just move on to other things. So if you find yourself like getting bored while watching a movie or a show or whatever, it could be just it got kind of confusing and frustrating, and you just didn't want to deal with it because the director didn't take the time to really figure out what they were doing, and just kind of shoved it in front of you the way good enough, right? So even though you don't know why things are happening or where or how, they decide, well, it's whatever. They'll rely on the branding to carry it or something. I remember watching, I haven't seen all of them, I don't remember exactly which one it was, but I was watching one of the Transformers movies a long time ago, and I had no idea what was going on, where they were at, or why. It was completely confusing as to all of that information. And, you know, there's little characters like running around yelling about something or other, and it seemed like they were in a real hurry to get there. But I didn't know, you know, where it was and why it mattered and how it went. So I think that's often, you know, more important than you know, saying the exact number of panels per page. But I think if you look at like American comics, you know, it's like 4 to 6 panels per page. It's pretty common. Hey, just open them up and take a look though. See how many they go with. It's like, you know, another reason maybe to do more panels per page is, you know, you maybe do more drawings, but the drawings don't have to have as much detail in them or information, right? So you do a lot more of them, but they don't necessarily you know, contain, you know, all the smaller things you might put into a larger, more detailed panel. But I don't think there's like a hard, fast rule for that type of thing. Hi, Bosch. It's not time to get a wait. My dog is watching me very intently because it's an hour from his special time of day that only comes twice a day. And he's probably concerned that his human is talking to himself, which is, you know, not what we want to see happening. Really trying to clarify what's going on over there. So that's coming up toward us. These are wrapping around. Yeah, but I'm trying to get a variety of shots, so, you know. Let's see. Makes sense. This out here. I'll be right back. Alright, I'm back. Hello. Good. Ouch. Just banged my knees. I am back. So a little restroom break there. We'll be on for about another 45 minutes. We'll be back this evening to work on this some more. Maybe if I get it done enough now to start slinging some ink then. I feel like that should be there. Everybody see the Clayface trailer? That's better. And this should probably be a little bit longer and this a little bit shorter. Get that foreshortening going. Let's get my trusty small ruler out. Actually, I'm just going to do that. Other one's out, huh? Let's see. looks better, I think. Hi, Bosch. Welcome back. My dog likes to stay close when it gets to be near that time because humans forget all the time, apparently. And they need help remembering, so. Good afternoon, people popping in. Get my brush out. There we go. And I put a magnet. I thought it was easier to access up there. Good afternoon. Let's see. I'm doing 3:30. Oh, you start to kind of feel the time pressure. And my poor dog is like, ooh, what is my human talking about? Well, we could be doing our WALK and something to eat after that. Instead, it's making me wait this whole time, even though I know it's, for all intents and purposes, close enough. Hello. Master, huh? Who are you talking to? Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Dog's chomping on himself. Maybe it's time to get him back in the tub sometime this week. Don't like it when he gets chomping. Better. This is a crested wormhound. It's not time, you gotta wait. You ever tried to argue with a dog about what time it is? It's a challenging venture, to say the least. So, you know. They're very insistent that they know exactly what the time is and what you should do about it. That's been my experience anyway. Or it's close enough. So he says anyway, right? I had some drop frames there. I wonder what they were from. Let's see, try coming down here. Yeah, usually do let me know if there's any questions or comments out there. Hopefully answer them appropriately and correctly without misunderstanding them. Where did I put that? I was putting it down somewhere. I thought it was right here. That's where my brush is. It's not up here on this lip. It's not in my pocket. It's not over there. Down there. There. I don't know if I even had it that long ago in my pocket, or my hand rather. It's not in my pocket. Oh, there it is. It's hiding under my ruler. There it is. Simplify this. Knock this guy back too. There's too much stuff going on in this space. Let's see, let's pull that up with some soft shadow, see how I feel about it. Better, but we'll see. Let's go here to our little friend. Good afternoon. And you've got another 10, 15 minutes. I gotta get the dog out. It's W-A-L-K. and some dinner and all that good stuff. What do we think? Good afternoon. A couple more panels to touch up on the page. You know, I'm not trying to pencil over everything, just the kind of important details like the figures, maybe anything that I feel like lacks clarity from the original pencil that I did on here. So that's kind of the goal with what I'm working on here. But time's up. I'm going to get my dog out for his WALK, and I'll talk to you all later.